First of all, I just want to say thank you to the LCA network for the opportunity to talk about the work that we've been doing. And yeah, my presentation is mainly just going to focus on what I've learned about the shark trade in my past 2 years. Just my experiences doing a couple of seizures and inspections, and then this exciting new project we started with the 3D replica fins. I also just want to say thank you to Tess and Marine. Marine gave a talk a couple of weeks ago, and they really encouraged me to do this talk. Yeah, so excuse me if my voice shakes. I haven't spoken to this many people before, but I'll push through. So yeah, so just a little bit about me. I completed my BSc in zoology. And after that, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do or where I wanted to go in, because this field is quite broad. And that's when I decided to apply for an internship at SANBI, which is the South African National Biodiversity Institute. And I was placed within the wildlife economy unit, and it was a fairly new unit there. And it was my first introduction to looking at the value of wildlife and that interface between humans and wildlife. So one of my first tasks as an intern was to look at trophy hunting. And I went into that research task. I mean, I was coming from a very green background, of like non-harm towards all animals. And I basically had to look at the benefits of trophy hunting in South Africa. And it really opened my world to looking at the different perspectives and seeing, you know, we need to look at the value of wildlife, or else why would people, especially for local communities, in order to get them to conserve wildlife, why should they if wildlife doesn't provide any value to their lives? So it really opened up my perspective, and I wanted to learn a lot more. I realized that I don't know enough about that interface. And that's when I decided to apply for this master's course at the University of Kent, which specifically focuses on international wildlife trade. And it was a very broad course. It was a lot of coursework because I knew I needed to learn a lot more. So it involved a lot of economics, community development, trade. Yeah, and after I completed that course, I came back. And as Marcus said, I joined the WWF Graduate Internship Program. And it's a really great internship program here in South Africa, where they place you at organizations within your field. And that specific year, it was the first time that Traffic was an organization, and I immediately applied for them. It was my first choice. And yeah, I got the job, and Marcus was my mentor, and basically they decided to keep me. So what I do at Traffic, so Traffic is the Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network, and my role within Traffic is to mainly do trade analysis work. So, and a lot of my work is focused on marine trade, fisheries trade, as Marcus mentioned, and I evaluate the volumes and the value of trade. I look at where our trade is going, what countries we export into and import into, and the main market states. And in doing that, we try to identify whether there's any illegal trade going on, or unreported or unregulated trade, known as IUU fishing. So yeah, so my talk today is focused mainly on the international shark trade. And just to give you some background, yeah, so sharks are caught worldwide, and it's mainly to supply two main markets. the shark meat market and the shark fin market. And these two markets follow very distinct pathways. So the shark fins are caught to supply the luxury dried seafood market in Asia, for shark fin soup, which is a delicacy in Asia and status symbol. So people eat shark fin soup at wedding banquets, at Chinese festivals, like the Lunar New Year, and it's a form of like good fortune. So it has very high cultural significance in Asia. And then there's also the shark meat market, which is to supply growing markets across the world, particularly in South America, in Brazil and Uruguay. Shark meat has been used as an alternative protein source, also in Europe, like Italy, Spain, and Portugal, and Australia. So just a bit of background on the global shark trade. So shark catches peaked in the year 2000 at around about 880,000 metric tons. And since then, it's been declining. And this can be for a number of reasons. Either countries aren't reporting their catches, or populations have been declining. And yeah, the top 3 global shark catches in the world has probably remained the same for the last 10 years. Indonesia is the highest shark catcher in the world, followed by Spain and India. And then here on the left is just a bit of stats showing that 80% of shark catches are coming from the Atlantic Ocean. About 17% of sharks and rays are critically endangered. And there's about 153 shark species that are recorded by fisheries as being caught by fisheries. So just for some context in South Africa, so South Africa is the top 3 hotspot for shark biodiversity in the world. We have about 191 species, which is 1/3 of the global fauna, and 69 of those are endemic to South Africa, which means they only occur in our waters. And we're also a global tourist destination, especially for shark cage diving. So this is just a brief background on our fisheries that are catching sharks. So there's 4 main fisheries that either catch, they're targeting sharks, or they're catching it as bycatch, which means sharks are just getting caught within their nets, but they're not necessarily targeting them. It's mainly within tuna fisheries and so on. But so these are the 4 fisheries in South Africa that have recorded data for catching sharks: the pelagic long-line fishery. And these images just shows the type of gear that is used. And then the trawl fishery, the commercial line fishery, and the demersal fishery. So the demersal fishery is a target fishery on a very small fishery on the east coast of South Africa. And the sharks caught in that fishery as particularly for export to Australia for shark meat. And the other fisheries all catch sharks as bycatch, even though, yeah, they're not targeted, but it still counts for the higher catches. So just a bit of background on CITES. So CITES is a convention on international trade. So this is the main body that regulates international trade. So there's about 150 countries in the world that's a party to the convention. And once a country is party to this convention, they need to implement regulations. So, and basically, animals that are listed on these CITES appendices, if they occur in your country, then that country, the government needs to implement those regulations. So currently there's about 44 sharks and rays that are listed on the CITES appendices. And these specific species were listed because their populations have suffered significant declines because of the global markets. And for the trade to continue, governments have to produce export permits, and they have to show that that catch was caught legally and it's sustainable. So this is just to highlight the major listings of sharks over the years, and it's just to say that from 2014 onwards, that was the game changer for shark trade, because these species, the porbeagle, the oceanic whitetip, hammerheads, and mantas, they are the commercially traded. So they were traded previously. So basically, now countries that were trading in these species needed to develop these export permits and show that it's where previously they didn't necessarily have to. So I just wanted to show the value of the shark trade, just with South Africa as an example, between shark fins and shark meat and what causes the illegality in shark fins. So shark fins has a much higher value. This is the value per kilogram. So across since 2012 to 2020, the value of shark fins is about between 30 to 45 US dollars for shark fins, whereas meat has remained consistent. It's always around about 2 to 3 US dollars per kilo. So that high value in shark fins is what causes people, one of the reasons why people would poach shark fins, much like it is with China horn and so on. If a product has a higher value, people would most likely try and poach it. So this is just to show the trade flow of shark fins from South Africa. So as you can see, all our shark fins is being transported to Asia. About 99% of our shark fin exports are to Hong Kong, Singapore, Japan, and Macau, SAR. And most of it is being transported via shipping container and via airport. Just another graph showing what we do is we look at the export volumes and we compare what a country is exporting compared to what other countries are reporting as being imported from those countries. So this is just showing what South Africa has exported over the years and what the world has reported being imported by us. And as you can see, there's quite significant discrepancies in these years. And so what we would do when you'd see that, then you'd go and investigate further for those specific years. You'd go and look at which countries were imported to in those years and exported to, and try and find out why there's such a big discrepancy for those years and see if there was any illegality going on. Okay, so looking at the illegal shark fin trade, shark fins can be illegally traded in three main ways. Either they export in CITES listed species without the relevant export permits, which is the main way in which sharks are illegally traded, or they misdeclared in shark fin consignments. So they'd either declare it as dried fish or just fish instead of shark fins. And then also where shark fins are sourced from illegal fishing operations within the source country, like finning the sharks before they are landed, which is illegal in most countries. Okay, so I just wanted to give a few examples of illegal shark fin trade within Southern Africa. And from data that we've sourced, online data that we've sourced of seizures, the main methods of concealing shark fins is within containerized cargo. So what people would do is they would take a blue shark, for example, which isn't CITES listed, and um, uh, uh, basically fill the containers with blue sharks and hide the illegal shark fins like hammerheads within them. So yeah, can containerized cargo. They also transported in freight or in personal baggage, in airplanes, or by postal parcel. And another thing to highlight is that shark fins are commonly transported along with other illegal products, especially abalone. A lot of the seizures you'd find shark fins transported with abalone, sea cucumbers, seahorses, and sometimes even ivory. Yeah, so these pictures at the bottom, this one on the right, that was in 2019. Yeah, so that was here in Muizenberg in Cape Town, where dozens of juvenile sharks were caught and dumped on the beach with their heads and the fins removed. And then this hammerheads here in the middle, that was about 16 kilograms of hammerhead fins that was transported from Mozambique via Joburg, and its final destination was in Hong Kong. So this was also just to show that South Africa is also a transit nation for other countries to transport through us. There was another case of Brazil transporting shark fins caught there through Joburg, but it was actually caught in Joburg before it went to Hong Kong. Okay, so this was shark fin ID that we did here in Cape Town. So this was a seizure that was done at Cape Town International Airport that was destined for Hong Kong. So this was about 80 tons of dried shark fins that was tightly packed into these white plastic bags. And this was my first seizure that I'd ever done. And it was quite overwhelming because I work with these numbers all the time. This is what I like. I look at the volumes all the time. And this was the first time that the reality hit for me what those numbers actually look like. So yeah, there was about 8 crates within this storage facility with these tightly packed bags of dried shark fins. And yeah, it was really hard. We were quite a number, maybe about 5 people, and it took a long time going through these fins, and even just pulling the fin out the bag was quite yeah, hard because they were so tightly packed together. And then this year on the right was also just a picture I took in the facility of like a whole refrigerator filled with abalone. Yeah, so so this was my first introduction to the challenges of IDing shark fins. So this was mainly blue sharks, which aren't CITES listed, so they didn't need any CITES permits, but they suspected that there was hammerhead shark fins within them. So we had to now go through all of them to try and identify the hammerhead shark fins, because then they could stop that consignment. Yeah, so the next shark fin ID we did now in 2020, and this was a seizure done by a fishing company here in South Africa. They also suspected that there was hammerhead shark fins, and yeah, this one was also quite sad for me because, as you can see here, there was a number of juvenile sharks caught here, and it also just showed me the reality that a lot of juvenile sharks are getting caught and being exported, and this is also one of the reasons why the populations are declining so fast. yeah, so this was my first time seeing frozen shark fins. The previous seizure was dried shark fins. And yeah, as you can see here on the left, we only had these ID guides, and there have been ID guides produced um, for many years now, and it's the only thing that you have to go on. So you have to go through this book, going through all the pictures, trying to identify, is this the CITES listed species or not? And yeah, majority of these shark fins were mako sharks. And then, yeah, we identified what we suspected were the hammerhead sharks. And then DNA analysis was done and found that there were 10 fins from CITES listed species. And basically, the case was finalized in Cape Town, and the company that had caught the fins, they received a fine and could continue fishing. So these are the ID guides that I mentioned. These really good ID guides that have been made by a number of organizations. And as more sharks are listed on CITES, which is something that's been happening increasingly over the years as more sharks have been impacted, you need to update these ID guides. So the one here on the top left, this is a program called iSharkFin, and basically it identifies, you have to upload a picture and it identifies the fin. But what we found is that it's let me take a breath. It's quite hard to identify dried fins, which is dried fins is the main form in which shark fins are exported. It's really good with frozen shark fins or no, fresh shark fins. But the main way in which they are exported or transported is in dried form. And yeah, so what we found is that these ID guides are really useful, but it's just really hard when it comes to training customs officials. I mean, these are the guys that are on the border. They're the ones that are dealing with these volumes of shark fins coming through our borders. And all they have to go on is this picture in the book, and it's really difficult instead of having the real shark fin. You know, many of these customs officials have never even seen a shark before. So here they have to try and identify what shark species it is just based off of the fin, which is really hard. I mean, even a lot of scientists struggle to identify them. So this is when the idea for the 3D replica fins came up. So Charlene De Silva, which is a shark scientist at the Department of Fisheries, she and Marcus, they've been doing these training sessions with fisheries officials over the years. And she came up with the idea to, why not make just replica fins of CITES listed species? Then you have the fin and you can use it in training. And that's basically what happened. We got funding in 2018 and started this whole process of developing these 3D fins. So the first step was scanning the fins. So we first needed to find a set of CITES listed fins because we didn't have any. And this picture on the bottom left, this is Deborah Abercrombie, which is a shark expert from United States. And she's probably one of the only people that has a full set of real dried shark fins that are CITES listed. And she would go around the world and train customs officials with a set of fins. And it's quite, because real dried shark fins smell quite badly. And it's quite a mission because when you're traveling with them, because they're CITES listed, you have to get an export, a CITES permit. So it's a lot of admin taking this bag of shark fins around the world trying to train people. So we got her to scan the shark fins along with a couple of shark fins we had here in South Africa, for the blue shark and the mako shark. And we scanned them. We found 3D printing companies, and basically they took us through this whole process where they scanned it and it creates this digital representation of the fin. And then we printed them, and we used the process known as sintered laser printing, and we used nylon as the main material. And we were quite lucky because we hadn't done this before. So we literally had no idea whether it was going to come out right or how, but we were quite lucky with this sintered nylon printing because the fin came out with a very rough texture, which is similar to what a dried fin looks like and feels like. So yeah, this is how they came out once they were printed. And then the next step was painting the fins. And that was probably the hardest step because you needed to get them really accurate. It had to be a replica of the real fins. And we got this amazing company in Cape Town. They work in the film industry. They work a lot with prosthetics as well. And yeah, we sent them pictures of the real fins, and yeah, as you can see here on the left, this is a blue shark dorsal fin. That's the real one, and then that's the printed and painted one next to it. So they were really great. We had a lot of consultation with them. They painted it, and then we gave them feedback of maybe certain markings that they needed to make more prominent. For example, like the oceanic white tip. This is an oceanic white tip, just to make sure that there is the mottled white color there on the top. Yeah, so then this is the final printed set that we had, and it came out great. Like, this is the bowmouth guitarfish. This is a great hammerhead here, blue shark. Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of them, but the final set came out really amazing, and it's almost indistinguishable between a real shark fin. And then we basically had to start rolling out our shark fin training with customs officials and fisheries officials. And this was probably my most favorite part of the whole process. So the way we set up our training, Charlene De Silva, this is Charlene De Silva here, she would start off with giving the fisheries side and explaining everything that goes into fisheries, and how sharks are caught. And then I would give the trade side and explain what we've seen in the imports and the exports, and what we've seen in South Africa's reporting. And then Marcus would round off the whole training. It was really, I think we've really improved our training. We had a session in December last year, just with first two fisheries, a head fisheries officials and a head customs officials, COVID. And it was a very informative session, and we got a lot of feedback from them. And then now in June, we ran this larger training session, and it really helped us in optimizing our training, so that even just explaining our trade work and the science part of things, because these are customs officials, so making sure we're not using lingo that they don't understand, and making sure that, we get the best out of our training. So we've adapted quite a lot. And then we do the ID part and explain the key features to them. And how to distinguish between dorsal and pectoral fins and so on. Yeah. And then also they run a mock seizure. So we give them real fins that we've confiscated over the years, and then we give them the replica fins. So then they would go around and try and identify which are CITES listed and which are not. And it was really great for me because it felt very interactive and it felt very informative, especially the got to mention previously. It was very like as we would show them our data and what we've seen, they could also give us feedback of why our data looks like that, and because they're the people on the ground, they're the ones working with it. So that was my favorite part. And as much as we informing them, they are also informing us, and it felt very collaborative, and like we're working together, government, NGOs, scientists, we're working together to try and figure out this problem. And I think also with these with the replica fins, having something in your hands to actually look at is so much easier than just having a book and trying to input knowledge on them. They can feel it, they can see it, and smell it and everything. I think it enhances training so much better. So yeah, there's just one more picture. And then the next step, we took the 3D fins one step further, and we decided why not add the shark names onto the fins. So this is a process known as retopology, where they adapt the scan, and then the shark file, the shark scan, and then it can be printed with the shark name on it. So basically, this would be used for frontline officials. So then you have the shark fins without any name on it for training purposes, and then these ones with the names printed on them. And then we made these little raised sections where we added QR codes onto them. And then that QR code can be scanned, and it takes you to a dedicated web page for that specific fin with more information on its CITES listing, its endangerment, and more ID features. So this was done for the purpose for officials who don't have any training. And it's mainly for the frontline officials for quick decision making in the process. Should they stop this consignment? Should it go for DNA analysis? It's to help that process in the moment for quick identification. And they wouldn't need to have any training prior, when using this set. And basically what we hope for this project going forward. So we've made all the scans available online for free. They can be found on our website, and the QR codes are there. There's painting guidance as well, and there's a how-to guide which explains how we went through this whole process. And we've all made it free because we want other countries to also make use of this. This isn't just for South Africa. There's a lot of countries trading in sharks, and a lot of, especially within developing countries, our customs officials and government officials are understaffed and they're under capacity. So this was made to aid our customs officials and to help them in this. It's a challenge, it's a really big challenge, and with the volumes that's passing through our borders, and they have to look for other illegal products. It's not just wildlife products that's going through. There's drugs, there's weapons, there's much higher priority things going through our borders. So this is supposed to make that process easier for them. So we want to roll it out to all African countries, especially West Africa and developing countries. The next steps that we want to do is we also want to translate the shark names into other languages. So specifically French for West African countries and Spanish. And as I said, it's for two purposes: for capacity building and for frontline officials who aren't trained and who don't have any knowledge. So Is that the end? Oh, yeah, so that is basically the end of my talk. This is just to thank all our collaborators and our partners. A project like this can't be done just by one person. It was a huge effort, especially on the 3D printing side. This is a new field for us. I mean, we're from conservation. We don't know anything about like 3D printing. So we've been really lucky with the service providers that we've got here in South Africa, because they actually guided us through this whole process and in developing these fins and actually making it way more useful than what we first intended before we got the names on and the QR codes. Yeah, so thank you.
Marcus, can I ask if you could just discuss the one question from Mampeti Matete again? When does trading in the fins or sharks become legal or illegal?
So, yes, it's not. Let me put my video on as well. It's unfortunately not such a simple answer. Essentially, not all countries have the same legal requirements for around fin trade. So a very simple answer, and that's the one I kind of typed up there, was provided from that country, it's compliant with the national laws of that country and it meets the requirements of the international agreement CITES, the trade will be legal. You know, across the trade chain, the same will apply on the import side. If they have stricter measures, the importer will have to comply with those measures. And I just made a note there that, for instance, the UK has recently, very recently, banned the trade in all shark fins. So that's into, through, out of the UK. So it's quite varied across the world. The Maldives, for instance, for some years now has banned the catch of sharks, basically, because sharks are so valuable for their tourism industry. And there's some kind of there's a range of other laws which are not consistent across countries, how sharks can be landed, whether they must be attached to the body of the shark, whether they land when they're landed, whether they can be cut off after being caught at sea, and then there's a weight proportion that needs to be met. So, you know, it gets kind of complicated and it differs from one country to another.
Thank you, Marcus. Maureen, can I ask you if you could please ask your question again? If you could just unmute yourself, please.
Okay, my question was, I don't remember what I think I was asking if the number of seizures and identification of the illegal fins has increased since the introduction of the 3D print.
Oh yeah, good question, and one we're desperate to know the answer to, but it's still early days for us. So you know, we over the course of the next between now and the end of the year, traffic will distribute about 6 fin sets to South Africa, a couple of countries in West Africa, Central African coast there, so probably Republic of Congo and Senegal, Namibia as well, and we're making up fin sets for Sri Lanka. We need them to be out there probably for 6 to 12 months, and we need to engage closely with those customs and fisheries authorities that are actively using the fins and get their feedback. And I guess it'll be a mix of, you know, qualitative and quantitative feedback as to how effective they are and how much they support the fisheries officials in the field. You know, one of the kind of the best things I heard was we contacted Hong Kong customs, you know, just sort of when we started making our first set of fins. We hadn't finished yet, and we thought, well, Hong Kong, it is, you know, the vast majority of shark fin trade passes through Hong Kong more than any other customs agency in the world. Surely they will need them. But they politely declined, and they said, well, thanks very much, this sounds fascinating, but all our customs and fisheries officials use ID guides, and they use real shark fins as well. So because they make so many seizures, they have quite an extensive collection of fins from a full range of species, including all the CITES listed ones. And they use that combination of real fins and guides. And when they told me that, I thought, well, that's all the more reason for us to produce the replica fins. The guides, there's some great guides that have been developed. And if those can be used in combination with our fins, which have the QR code facility, so if we can kind of replicate what's being done in Hong Kong, where they deal with more fin consignments in any country in the world, then hopefully we can improve the ability to correctly identify.
Thank you, Marcus. If you would like to ask a question, please use the reaction tool at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand. Christine, could you please unmute yourself and ask your question? Also, just indicate if you would like to ask the question to Simone or to Marcus, or both.
Okay, good evening, good morning. My name is Christine from Kenya. I'll ask the question to both of them. Any of them can answer. When you look at the trends in shark fin trade, and then the endemic species of sharks in South Africa, which are 69 only, what is the South African government doing in assistance with traffic to stop the trade completely? Because I believe you cannot distinguish between the legal and illegal trade in shark fins. And also, what is the relationship between shark fin trade and other related crime? Like and maybe when you're linking, do you find any correlation? Last one, and governance. How is it operating in this environment with shark fin trade as an illegal, and you have the species listed in CITES? At point of arrest, how do you distinguish that the species is under CITES or not? Like it seems to be a complicated issue to tackle. How are you managing as traffic?
Simone, do you?
No, you can go for it. Are you there?
Marcus, are you taking?
Yeah, I'll take it. So just working backwards, that will distract me a bit, but so there was the first part of the question was on seizures of fins along with other wildlife products, and I noted, I put a comment in the chat box that certainly there is evidence of this happening. We've seen seizures where fins have been seized along with abalone, sometimes rhino horn, and other wildlife products. And I think, sometimes because syndicates are involved, could be other non-wildlife products that are also legal, drugs or weapons or something. So this is not always the case. It depends on the illegal trade situation. On the question, there was a question around, how easy is it to distinguish between the CITES listed fins and the non-CITES listed fins? So in practice, pretty much a customs official will need to make a fairly rapid decision if they're inspecting a consignment of fins. There's pressure to get consignments through a port, a seaport or an airport or a land port. And they basically need to have sufficient confidence in stopping a consignment. So they don't need to be 100% certain that there is an illegal, trade is perhaps illegal. Some of the commodities don't have the required documentation, whatever that is. But they need to have a certain level of confidence that by stopping that consignment, there's a high chance that they have made the correct decision. They will then, following the stopping of the consignment, the samples will be taken of the fins and sent off for DNA analysis to confirm, determine what the species composition is of the fins that have been seized. Because if that case is going to go forward as a criminal offense, that would be required. If there's a question from the defense in court, that level of confirmation will be required through DNA analysis. And then the first question was around what South Africa is doing to, I guess, to protect our sharks and combat the illegal trade. So there's not time now to talk about it, but and there are perhaps other people on the call are better informed than I am on the National Plan of Action for Sharks, which South Africa developed some years back and has recently revised. But South Africa has a comprehensive, detailed action plan for conservation and management of sharks in our waters. One aspect of that, obviously, is regulating the fishing and trade in shark products to ensure that those are legal and sustainable. So at the moment, we don't have we have national laws on fin trade, meat trade. Remember, it's not just about the fin trade. Meat trade is a big driver for the catch of sharks as well. So even if there's a global ban on the trade in shark fins, that's not going to stop fishing vessels catching sharks, and it's not going to stop the trade in shark meat. So, if you want to conserve sharks, banning fin trade globally may make a difference. It'll depend on the species. It'll depend on locations in the world where they are caught in. But it's not going to stop the vast majority of them still being caught in a wide range of fisheries around the world.
Simone, would you like to add anything, or are you happy with that?
I am happy with that. I will just add, I think this goes into one of the other talks about, sustainable use. In my opinion, I would always say banning a product, especially a high value product like this and something that is being traded on this level. Banning is not the answer, in my opinion. In most cases, it will just make it go even more underground, and it will make it even harder to regulate. So yeah, that's just a personal opinion for me. I think we should always try and work towards sustainable use. It's hard and you have to consider a lot, but I think it's much more effective than outright banning the trade.
Thank you, Simone. Sospeter Kihambi, I saw you had your hand up, but it was taken down again. Do you still have a question to ask? No, then I'm going to move to Marty. Marty, please unmute yourself and go for it.
Cool. Thanks very much for the interesting talk, Simone. And yeah, very, very interesting topic. And my question isn't meant to be understood as a criticism in any way. You guys are doing amazing work, but in a way, it's kind of almost too late to find the fins in a bag because the shark is already dead. Is there? How do we actually stop it almost at source? I don't know. And again, what you guys are doing is amazing, but it's almost like reactionary to something that's already happened. You've got similar to pangolin scales, you've got tons of bags of scales and all the pangolins are already dead. So that's sort of the one. How do we actually stop it happening in the boats or in the fisheries? I mean, do we need more monitors on boats? Is that even possible? And then what actually happens to all the fins that you guys do confiscate? I mean, do they just get burned, similar to like the ivory tusks and rhino horn, or do they eventually get sold and then the money comes back to you guys? Or yeah, I'm just interested what happens there. And then just the last, I mean, I've seen some of that footage of sharks being finned alive and thrown back into the sea without their fins on, and it's just absolutely horrific. Yeah, so, but yeah, thanks. Very, very interesting talk. Thanks.
Marcus, do you know what happens with the fins at the storage facilities?
Yeah, so it'll again, it's going to be different depending on the country, but for South Africa, the fins, and this happens with abalone as well. It's very controversial, but for many years now, those have been sold on a tender basis. The abalone that's seized by customs or fisheries goes to a storage facility, and then through a kind of closed tender process, it's sold. So all that illegally caught, illegally traded, confiscated product actually ends up back in trade. The proceeds of the sale go to the Marine Living Resources Fund, which can then be used to cover operational costs by Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. So it can go back into anti-poaching operations, which is good, especially for a department that is underfunded and needs those funds. But it's it's a conflict of interest. Unfortunately, it's in DEF's interest to keep confiscating abalone, and shark fin is I think is mine. I know that it has been sold before, but I think the vast majority of the funds that they generate from the sale of confiscated products is from abalone. But if you keep getting money from abalone sales every year, and it goes every year, then you start to depend on it. And if the poaching stops and you stop seizing abalone, then you lose out on whatever it is, 5, 10, 20, 30 million rand a year from your operational budget. So it's it's a difficult situation for DEF, but it's not the right policy. Simone, do you want to comment on the other question, or do you want
at the source? I mean,
the question of, like, you asked, of seizing. When the shark is dead, isn't it a bit too late already? You might have a successful seizure, but the sharks are dead.
The sharks. I mean, the whole point of traffic, we do look at the trade. So generally, the products, the animals are dead already, which one would say is really a lost cause. But there is a lot being done on the fisheries end at the source. Maybe not enough, but they, as you say, you would need. I would say it's one of the biggest issues is not having enough observers on the board on board the boats where they can observe the fishing operations. But the source side of things needs to be, I guess, more work needs to be done on that side.
Yeah, and if I can just come in there as well, add on to that, Simone, that's absolutely right. And what we try and do, and I think many other governments and other organizations recognize that you kind of need to try and work at all points along the supply chain, and that can also involve trying to get behavior change on the demand side, working with the industry, working with governments, but ultimately to have that change on the sea or in the bush, wherever the animals are living. Plants.
If I can maybe just add to the comment. I mean, I think the government charges a lot of money in terms of licenses, etc., to all of these fishing companies, and that revenue that they get, surely a lot of that could actually be channeled into observers on boats and whatever. I mean, because ultimately, it'll, if there's a cost, it's going to get passed on to the end users. But I think this is a similar problem with albatross and seabirds that are caught in the long line fishing, and it's a kind of wide problem on a lot of species. And I mean, I was just wondering if there's a sort of a model to actually try and get more and more observers onto every single boat that goes out. And then if there isn't an observer, then they almost like get arrested immediately. I don't know if I'm being naive or simplistic, but yeah.
I mean, ideally you want to have an observer on every boat. Sometimes logistically it's just not possible because they need all the berths for crew, or the boats are really small. There seems to be an increased use of CCTV on vessels that can film the catch, what's happening on the deck. So you can have a number of different cameras set up at different points and actually monitor just about everything. And I think as we see the development and evolution and improvement in AI and the ability of software to do some species recognition based on the shapes of the different fish, we're going to see, and we already are seeing more and more use of that. And some of the trials that have been run using those systems and compared to live human observers, sometimes using camera footage and having someone based on shore observing the footage either live or later is more, I guess, more efficient in terms of making more correct data capture of the fish coming off the line. So that's one aspect of being an observer. Of course, having an observer on a vessel has a number of other bigger benefits. The ability, for instance, to take samples and do other forms of research. But purely for compliance purposes, these other electronic systems can be very effective.
Thanks, Marty. I just want to move to a question in the chat at the moment from Andre, and it's related to the previous question. Have any attempts been made to collaborate with the shark fishermen, making them part of the solution instead of part of the problem as a means of sustainable use?
Yeah, Simone, do you want to go, or do you want me to go?
I'm not sure on that end. You go.
Yeah, I think this has been tried in a number of countries, and this continues to be. Through, for instance, setting up, working with fishing vessels and fishing industry on setting up traceability systems for tracking sharks from the time they're caught until right through the potential right through the supply chain, and having systems like that demonstrate that from the time the animal's caught right through the chain, everything was done legally, and it comes from a well-managed, sustainable fishery. That involves obviously working very closely with the fishermen. There've been I think quite a few initiatives with commercial fishing operations, with artisanal fishing operations to, for instance, reduce bycatch in purse seine fleets. The ISSF, an international organization, has worked with tuna fishing fleets, done trials, trying different things to reduce shark catch in purse seine. I think even now in long line vessels. So it's not something that traffic personally works on, but I'm aware that there are these initiatives. Absolutely, I think there need to be way more of them, and lessons learned where there are good results. It's complicated though, always. Every fishery is different. Just within a country, different parts of the country, there's so many different factors influencing fishermen, depending on whether they fishing for just to get protein and feed themselves, or whether it's a massive fishing vessel that's part of a huge corporation. The drivers are different, the motivations, and so it's complicated.
Thank you, Marcus. Question from Dr. Llewellyn Taylor, please. Just unmute yourself, please.
Okay. Hi everyone. Am I on now? I think so. Well, just on the slide on TAC, why fins? I mean, that was the first thing that came to mind. I mean, I know much about this, but why fins? And then looking at cultural evolution of the Indonesians, for example, is there something in the cultural evolution that would suggest fins, or is it just convenience? Is it because there are rods, cartilaginous rods in the fins, which would make a good component of the soup? Why fins, Marcus? And then I have another comment to make as well, though.
Simone, do you want to do this one?
Okay, I'll do this.
I think you already mentioned it, but you can expand on what you discussed in the talk.
Yeah. So the fins, I mean, it's been consumed for the shark fin soup for many decades, and it's the denticles within the fins that are used, and then they dry it and they process it, and it becomes like a noodle soup. Okay. So, but I would say on the as you were saying, the cultural significance, I know it's an old, a generational thing, and what we have seen in recent years, that there's a lot of the younger generations that are against the consumption of shark fin soup. So it is changing. We've seen a change in the dynamic on the demand side, that they aren't as and they know because they're more informed. So they're more against it, and it's more about the older generation and trying to get that out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and the other question is, are all 5 types of fins on the body and all 8 fins utilized, or is it dominated by the dorsal fin?
Yeah, so it's dominated by the dorsal and the pectoral fin for shark fin soup. Normally, I think the caudal fin is also occasionally used, but it's mainly the dorsal and the pectoral fin.
Yeah,
The
okay,
other
great.
fins
And
are discarded. Are they discarded, Marcus? The other fins?
Yeah, I suppose it depends, you know. Yeah, so the caudal fin, the lower caudal lobe, for
Yes.
some species is used, but there doesn't seem to be any of the attractive material in the upper caudal lobes. I guess the other fins are discarded. I've actually never questioned that. I suppose in some countries where, you know, every bit of protein is valued, it might end up in a soup or something like that. Hopefully.
okay, and then just, if you don't mind, just one comment. You know, for our Sustainable Utilization Symposium on the 4th of September, it's obvious that terrestrial ecosystems are going to dominate the discussion and also dominate the case studies. And, you know, whilst we were busy developing the whole symposium, it just dawned on me that we really did need to look at the marine environments as well, and sustainable utilization within the marine environment. So we don't actually have any specific talks on that. So it would be great if someone within the marine environment, in terms of the ecologists and so forth, could actually take part and make some valued comments for us on the day, because it just concerns me that we're not actually including the marine environment in it.
Yeah, and there's a lot. I mean, on the marine side, I mean, it's sea cucumbers, it's fish maws, it's seahorses.
Yeah, I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I think, if I may, Johan, you can make the link between Dr. Taylor and Simone to see if there's somebody maybe from Sanby or to join that day. Yes, that's good. I see Chris Fellows has got his hand up. Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Chris. Simone, thank you very much for a very enlightening talk, and Marcus for your input. I think your initiative with the 3D modeling is a fantastic one. I think it's very sorely needed in South Africa. I know from a lot of first-hand experience seeing shark long-lighting vessels offloading their catches. You know, a lot of catches have been misidentified, so congratulations on that. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on prosecutions. We've been trying to get a vessel prosecuted that was caught in De Hoop Marine Reserve 3 years ago, catching protected species with photo ID, with GPS coordinates, with written statements, basically as open and shut case as you could ever have, and it's still going on 3 years later. What successes has South Africa had to date in terms of actually prosecuting people caught with illegal shipments, and what have the fines that have been issued to date amounted to? Thank you.
Okay. We have to, Simone, if you've got it close by, you can dig out. We've got some facts on some consignments that either took place in South Africa or where the seizure took place somewhere else, but it came from South Africa. The latter point obviously is not going to help with your question. Look, it's not something that, you know, we don't work actively with sort of the NPA or DEF on specific cases. There's just been, honestly, I think 1 or 2 cases where we've helped with ID. So, but we do capture as much information as we can on all wildlife trade incidents. So Simone's going to try and dig out those cases where there have been successful prosecutions and fines. I think there's not a lot of cases from what I know, not that many. It's nothing like abalone or rhino horn or elephant ivory. And my sense is there's still a long way to go in raising awareness within the judiciary, building capacity with prosecutors, and providing them with the tools that they can successfully prosecute these cases. And I think, as you probably know, it needs not just a a strong justice system, but strong, well-capacitated wildlife investigators as well. Capacity to handle evidence correctly, and the ability to and the budgets to be able to do DNA analysis and so on. And we do have a lot of very experienced, capable deaf officials, but it's a challenge along our coastline. And sadly, I mean, abalone poaching just sucks up so much of our compliance capacity. It really does, and to the detriment of ensuring adequate compliance along a whole range of other fisheries. It's kind of abalone and rock lobster related compliance really uses massive amounts of manpower. And yeah, I think that there's a real need for South Africa to kind of step up our game and improve regulation around shark product trade, both meat and fins. Meat's harder, especially once it's processed and you've got fillets of white meat. It becomes obviously way harder. That you're never going to do a visual ID on that. But Chris, I don't know with your particular case. I don't know if it's an NPA issue, if it's a political will issue. I have no idea. But just wish you success. Simone, have you managed to find those?
Yeah, so we haven't had a lot of seizures that were reported, but I see there was one in 2017. There was 2 shark seizures, one in Joburg, and basically the suspects were arrested, but it's so varied across all the different seizures. If they're caught with illegal fins, sometimes they get slapped just with a fine and they get let go. Other times they are prosecuted and they go to jail. With this 2017 one, they were caught with 300 kilograms of shark fins and abalone, and then 3 suspects they actually were arrested. But the other seizures, it was just they were slapped with a fine and then they were let go. And I remember, I don't know, I see Sade is on the call. She's done offender surveys and they actually or other previous work that was done, and they show that a lot of the seizures and the prosecutions, there's no, what's the word, consistency amongst the fines that are given and whether they are prosecuted. That doesn't answer much of your question.
If I can come in here, Johan, I just want to say that it seems to me in South Africa in general, well, other countries too, but in general, we always talk about what is the single point of failure. The single point of failure is the fact that cases that goes to court just doesn't get done. And people do not get the necessary punishment and being arrested and punished. And the reality is the outcome of that is people get away with it because they keep on doing it. It's just how it is. There's a direct correlation. I've seen some research on that. There's direct correlation between whether people are arrested and found guilty and then a reduction in that particular crime or not. And it doesn't happen, it carries on, sadly, unfortunately.
Yeah,
sorry, Simone.
No, I was just going to say, I think the harder the penalties, the more people need to be incentivized not to poach. But I mean, at the moment they're all getting away with it, and it's not, there's nothing stopping them because the penalties aren't high. So yeah.
You see, it's a series of things. Eventually when, like Marty said, by the time we get to it, these sharks are dead and the fins are gone. That's the problem. But the series of things that lead up to it, and then if the legal system fail you, you fail. It's simple as that. But anyway, that is the reality. And Johan, I know that you have questions and answers. I see Jonathan has got his hand up, and then maybe we can take a last question or so. Over to you, Jonathan. One question, and then we'll allow one more question. I see we're already on 1.5 hours going. Jonathan, please, and then over
Thanks
to
very
you,
much,
Johan.
Chris. Okay, so we're very good at pointing fingers at other people and claiming that they're wrong and they're part of the problem. But what can I do to be part of the solution rather than be adding to the problem? Is there anything that I can do? You know, when you look at the chat box, it's pointing fingers at everyone else. What can I do?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I think sometimes, you know, there's so many, just within, let's say, the wildlife sector, so many instances of, you know, illegal catch, trade, harvesting, whether it's plants or animals. And one often has a very strong desire to personally make a difference. I think this, depending on what you do, and I think your ability to make a difference can also depend on what, you know, who you are and what you do. If, you know, the real demand, let's say, for instance, for fins lies outside of South Africa. The demand for meat predominantly also, we're not consumers of shark meat. It's Europe and Latin America and recently South Korea. So it's different to, you know, other fisheries products where we can encourage our friends and our family and say, look, don't just buy any seafood. You know, you just look at the SASSI list. Try and buy like you do everything. Try and consume responsibly. It's not something we can really do with sharks, at least with the trade. You know, the simple answer is always, well, donate some money to, you know, NGOs who are working in Asia and trying to, or wherever, to make a difference. Yes, that is one thing one can do for many you know, global issues. I think just even raising awareness amongst one's friends of issues like this. You tend to talk, you learn something new. You know, sharing that with your friends, your family, your peers, that has I think the ability, the potential to, you know, have some influence which you may not be aware of. You know, perhaps influencing someone who's involved in the trade, someone who perhaps has a role in regulating the trade and is perhaps not doing their job as effectively as they should be, and needs maybe some personal motivation. These, you know, these sorts of things are, you know, difficult, impossible to measure. So unfortunately, there's no easy answer for you on that. With the limited time that we have, sometimes maybe the answer is that there's another issue closer to home that that's maybe where you get a better bang for your buck if you invest your personal time in that. But thanks for the question, and thanks for wanting to make a difference. Yeah.
I just added into the chat the shark attack campaign, which is the campaign linked to this project that we're doing here in South Africa. And it's basically also about changing perceptions around sharks. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest issues as well. And this campaign also changed my own perception of sharks. So yeah, I think you guys can also go and look at it. And there's a lot of educational material. I think part of the issue is also educating people. A lot of people don't know about the shark fin trade. They don't know that fins, what fins are being used for, or even the shark meat side of things. So I think education is maybe the first step, and